Hello everyone, I hope you're well. Welcome to my YouTube channel. So I'd pop by as requested by Deborah, Deborah Hubbard. She would like me to create a card that's just very basic, very simple. So I thought, well, I've just taken delivery of Distress Oxide and I need to fulfill my pre-orders, but I think most of them have gone. So I've ordered again. I think I've got another delivery Friday, but I'll still need to order again. So the mini oxides have arrived and I thought I can create a very simple card for Deborah as requested. It's just deciding what colour. So I think I'll go for the let's take these out of the way. Let's just go for some neutrals at the moment. So you can see these are brand new packs. I've not opened anything. I can't have all 6 packs, but I'll just take those 2. And I've got a piece of Pink Frog Super Smooth card, 4 inches by 6 inches. And I'm just going to do a very basic card. And sometimes we can forget that even if you've been crafting for years and years and years, sometimes we can forget about doing some simple things. And it's nice sometimes just to pare it back and do something very basic. And these give me the opportunity to do something really basic. So when Tim bought them out at the weekend, I thought, I know what simple idea I'll do. So I've got them on the website if there's any left, and that describes which kit is which. But this kit has got bundled sage, crushed olive, peeled paint and cracked pistachio. Just wonderful. So that's just, you can rely on me to opening them all slapdash, but if you open them carefully, you can even use the packaging. There we go. I didn't open them very gently, but there you go. And I have to say, they are adorable. I've actually got the tins coming. They should be arriving Friday. Now, that's what UPS says. Now, I have to say, UPS said they were delivering this morning and they've arrived just, and it's 4:30. So they say they're delivering Friday. It could be Monday, but that's when I'm expecting the tins and the brushes. So I have to say, these are pretty adorable. They really are adorable. Now, I recommend that you go and watch Tim Holt's video. Now, you'll know for many years I've been an advocate of the Distress Oxides. I adore them and use them most days. And at first I thought, well, I don't need the mini ones because I just use the large ones anyway. But when they came, I instantly thought of some simple ideas. One, my design team was talking how, let me just take a stamp. Now, which stamp are you going to take? This is the hardest bit. Which stamp are you going to take? Nobody knows. Maybe sort of a... Right, so if I take the Dog Rose and Butterfly, and we'll just grab a scrap of card. This is just some scrap. I don't even know. Oh, it's just worked out the same size as that. But if we take some scrapped card and we take the Dog Rose and Butterfly, TE45. Now, I've not prepped anything. No idea. This is just a play. But I knew that when I get a couple of requests, I need to do one for Di as well, who's in Australia. But this request is for Deb Hubbard. But let me just show you that at first I thought, well, I've got the big oxides. I don't need the small ones because I don't do workshops around the country or whatever. And then I thought, hang on a minute. And we were talking about it in my design team. And one of the things they are good for is if you just want to, if you've got the big ink pads, and I know Tim said that these are a little bit firmer to get off, she says. There we go. And firstly, I like the little container. It's very cute. But with a big ink pad, it sort of gets everywhere. But with this, you've got the oxide ink, that beautiful oxide ink. Let me just leave it like that. So that was the bundled sage. I love it that the little name is on the reverse as well here. Very cute. I can apply the peeled paint, but I can really easily apply the colours, even right over the others, just in whatever areas I wish. So that's peeled paint, just so that you see I'm not cheating. Then we've got bundled sage, and I'm going to have to wait to have the other sets. So we've got crushed olive, so I can add crushed olive, but I can be more considered about where I'm adding it because the ink pads are so diddy. Oh, it's just they're wonderful. Sorry, I do like things in small sizes. This one is cracked pistachio, and I like how it just says cracked pea because it's so diddy. Sorry, small things amuse small minds, I do know that, but it's much easier to apply the ink, little bits of the ink on your stamp. So I'll just go back and I'm going to add a little bit more of bundled sage, and I can pick up the bundled sage. Just wonderful. Now if I want, I can just stamp like that, but what I'm going to do, I'm just going to give a fine misting of that stamp, and I mean just a fine misting. So we've just given that a fine misting. Now let's just stamp that. Again, I don't have to put loads of pressure on, and the oxides stay nice and wet and they react with water. They're a pigment dye fusion, and Tim and the team at Ranger have managed to sort out the formulation so that we can have them in a small ink pad. But look at that, just beautiful. Well, there you go, Deb. There's one simple idea. Now, what if you wanted to turn it into your card? This is a scrap piece of card that's got a slight mark on there. But if you wanted to turn this into a card, Deb, we could, let's have the second generation. Let's spritz that a couple more times. And now let's have the second generation. Let's have it there. So let's have the second generation. Just nice and simple, nothing too complicated. So now we've got the second generation, which works beautifully. What about third generation? Spritz again, and let's see if there's a third generation. Just see if there's a third generation on there. And you can see no cheating. I'm doing it, you know, live. I'm not editing the video, I'm doing it live. And instantly, you've got the foundation or the start of a card. So for you, Deb, if you wanted to do some little notelets, it works perfectly. The other thing you can then do, so I've got TE45 out, so say you just wanted to add a little bit more detail. So we've got this little text here on TE45 that just talks about garden. So you know it's going to work with exactly what you're doing. So if I grab a piece of copier paper. So let's take a piece of copier paper. Copier paper and an ink acrylic block. Spit it out, Tracy. I've got an arrow on here just so I know which way. Do I know which way? Yes, it is that way. So then let's open this pack. And I saw a lady who created a bookmark out of the packaging. That's a nice idea as well. I can't give credit for the lady who created the bookmark because it just popped up on my feed. And when I tried to go and have a look what a finished bookmark looked like, of course, you know what your feed's like, it just disappears. So in this set, these are super cute, these are. I've got antique linen, vintage photo, walnut stain, and black soot. So I could take the vintage photo. I'm good at getting them open. It's because it's my left hand. So use the vintage photo. And it's just to give some simple ideas for Deb. Now, I know I'm doing this as a request for Deb, but I hope that it helps anybody else out as well, just for some simple ideas. So I'm stamping that text stamp from TE45 with the vintage photo. Stamp's beautiful, and it just talks about our outdoor space. So what I'm going to do then is, let's just tear this out. And then if you wanted to add another little detail, We don't want it to look like a mouse has been at it. So let's just add a little bit of text. So I could add a little bit of text here, like so. Now don't forget, Deb's looking for some really, really basic ideas. Nothing too complicated, and that's what we need to remember. So I need to remember to not go too over the top. I need to think very, very basic. So let's just tear this paper that we've got. So this is simply copier paper, nothing too complicated. So we've got the copier paper there, and it just talks about the plants and everything else, just so you can see, just talks about that. And then on TE45, it's got the word garden. So if I use the word garden, let's just take that text stamp off for the moment, and we'll take that garden word. We'll grab another scrap of card. So I'll grab another scrap of card, and I know I've got plenty of scraps. And then we'll take our black ink, and this time I'm going to use a permanent ink, which is VersaFine Clair Nocturne. So take that VersaFine Clair Nocturne just on a piece of scrap card. I always tend to sort of try and stamp against a straight edge, because that helps in me stamping the sentiment a little bit straighter. Excuse my arm leaning across there. So we can add the garden text. Let's take this. At the moment, I've got free postage on the website until Friday. So let's just, there we go. So then we can take the word garden, and I can, without adding any bulk or anything, I can add a faux black mat, either with my black ink, like my Distress black soot, which is in the little kit here. I can add that against the edge, or I can use my Posca pen and do a faux black mat. So just going around, and I'm doing this on the copier paper because it helps so that I don't get that all over my non-stick craft sheet, and then I don't spread it everywhere, which is what Tracy normally does. So I've got that word on there. Let's just take the text, and then I can add that just here so that the text is still visible, like so. But just because you're doing something that is simple doesn't mean you don't want to make sure that you've still got those professional touches. So I'm going to add a little bird, which is from TE44. So let's take TE44, and I'm going to take the little bird. I think it's this one that looks very well used. And then I'm just going to ink that up with my black ink, my permanent ink, VersaFine Clair. And then I can just add this on the top. Again, it's going onto that oxide ink, so just give it a little bit of time just to make sure that makes a good impression. And that, you can't get much simpler than that. So that's a nice simple card, but just because it's simple doesn't mean that I don't approach it in the same way. So I still want a little bit of shading. Let's move that out of the way. A little bit of shading under there, just so that that looks nicely finished. Let's take the excess off. Just spread that out a little bit, just so that that looks nicely finished. And then we can add a few little splatters of Posca pen, or not. And if you want to, Deb, you can also add a little bit of text just in your background if you wish. But if you add this to a black mat, like so, you add that to a black mat, and then you add that to a white card blank 5x7, look how beautifully it's finished. But you can't get it, that's really nice and basic. Okay, what about another idea? When I am asked if I can just help out, I'd like to sort of make sure I follow through with answering those messages. So let's just come in again. Now I've got another piece of, just tell me what this is, 4x6. 4x6. And we've still got the same colours, bundled sage, peeled paint, crushed olive and cracked pistachio. So I'm going to take the bundled sage and I'm just going to, let's do it a little bit higher up. And I'm just going to press that onto my card. You're not worrying about gaps or anything like that. You're just placing it on your card. I'm going to add peeled paint. Obviously you can press in the middle of the ink pad. Then I'm going to use crushed olive. And this is the first idea I had when I saw the mini ink pads. Then we've got cracked pistachio. Okay, nice and juicy. And they are very wet. You can see I've not worried about whether it's straight or whatever it is. It's more sort of laying down that colour and just being mindful about laying down that colour. Now I'm just trying to decide whether I want to. I'm going to go through the colours again. So you could just keep it like that. Actually, let's keep that one like that for now. I'm then going to spritz with water. And we all know what oxides do. Most of us do anyway. We know that once we hit with that water, it then begins to move. Now, this is why I've not worried about, you know, you'll have to excuse me, I've got bites from the garden and they're driving me mad. But you can see why I didn't worry about the straightness or anything like that, because I knew that I was going to go outside those edges anyway. So the minute you add a bit of moisture, it goes everywhere. So I'm just sort of mopping up some of the wet a bit further out. And you can see that's moved nicely. Now I need my heat tool. Now, please remember, these are very sort of basic ideas. Now, I don't necessarily want to move the colour. I just want to dry the moisture. You don't have to spritz. You could just flick that with water from your hand. And you can see that on this occasion, I've not used any kitchen towel to blot the card, because I don't want to blot it, because that instantly mops up the colour, and I don't want to mop up the colour to necessarily take out the colour. So I don't want to use the kitchen towel to take out the colour. I want to keep the colour there, but with a sort of a few bleached out areas. So I'm just going to turn that over a little bit, just so that that flattens out and dries a little bit. Obviously I spritz with quite a bit of water, so you just need to be mindful of that. So let's just turn that over. And when you've got moisture involved, you're always going to get some bending and curling. That's the nature of the beast. So let's just give that a little bit of air. So then I'm going to take, I think I need another acrylic block. How many acrylic blocks can one person use? Let's grab that text stamp again. And I'm going to take, it's still a bit wet, I'm going to take the bundled sage, which is the first colour I added. So don't forget, this is about simple ideas. So I'm going to use the bundled sage, and I'm going to stamp the bundled sage on the bundled sage. Just wipe that a little bit. Then I'm going to use the peeled paint. That peeled paint has come out really beautifully. Sort of the way it's moved with the water. I love when you spritz with water, the unpredictable backgrounds that you get. So then again, I've now stamped with the peeled paint. What are you taking it off for, Tracy? Then I'm going to take crushed olive, another colour I've really got into at the moment. So I've got the crushed olive. So let's take that crushed olive and give that a stamp. And then, this is still wet here, another colour I absolutely love. And you can see I've sort of left them upside down at the moment, just so I can remember what I'm inking with, really. Cracked pistachio. I'm going to ink with the cracked pistachio. Nice and easy to handle as well, I have to say. But then I've never made it a secret that I adore oxides anyway. So what you've got now is I've got the coordinating text with the coordinating inks. And can you see it's still wet? So now I'm quite happy. It's been dried. I'm quite happy that I've got enough depth of ink on there. So let's just give that a blot. And you can see there's a little bit of ink that's come off there. But I don't want that just sitting on the surface. Okay. So if we just want a nice simple idea now, let's take the 6x6 stencil Wildflower. We'll take that Wildflower stencil, number 01. And then you can decide which floral you wish to use, or which way round, or whatever. So shall we put it coming off a little bit? And then I'm going to use some low tack tape, mainly because I know that I'll go over the edge of the stencil. So I've got some moisture still in that card, so you need to make sure that you've definitely got low tack tape. And if you haven't got low tack tape, wipe it against your skirt, trousers, skin, just to take some of the tackiness away from the product you are using. So I'm just adding some low tack tape so that I don't add any black ink where I don't want it. Okay, then we want to cut that flower short a little bit, so we'll cut that short and have it there. So just cutting that floral a little bit shorter. And because I'm a drip, I haven't got the blending brush out, so bear with me. Can't make it up, I'm dropping that many things on the floor. Is that one? I've still not got enough of my own blending brushes, I still need more. So I'm using my blending brushes. We all have different preferences of what we like, but to be honest, I will only stock products in my shop that I believe in, that I use. If I don't use them, I'm not really going to stock them. My DT asked me to get the brushes in from Tim because I've got a couple of ladies that absolutely adore brushes. So I will only get in the shop what we use. Now, I love my blending brushes. Well, these are brushes, but very, very dense brushes. So I'm going to use, let's just turn these around and they shut nice and firmly. So no drying out. I've got to have a tin now. I'll have to hope there's one left over for me. If not, I'll have to order again. That's a shame, isn't it? So let's grab our black soot distress mini oxide. And when you first get them off, it just feels a little bit stiffy. There we go. It comes off nicely. Look at the size of my blending brush for my ink, for my little oxide. So I'm just going to pick up. I could even go in, because it's so small. I have taped that up, haven't I? Because this is so small, I could even come in and just add some ink to my stencil, and then I can blend that ink into the stenciled area. Just wonderful. I could use my VersaFine Clair, but that gives me a slightly, obviously it's going to give me a different look because it's an oil-based permanent ink, and I do that quite frequently. I use my VersaFine Clair, but for this I want to use the oxide for a slightly different look. And don't forget, this video is all about simplicity, not complicated ideas. So let's just lift this up. So there we go. I've got my little floral on there. Then I can just wipe this clean, or you could add this to another project quite easily. Just spritz that with water and add that to another project very easily. No problem at all. You can even add another floral if you wished. So quite easy to use. But it's all about simple ideas. So let's move that colour all out of the way. Let's just plonk that out of the way. Put my little ink pad lid on. There we go. And then I can take the same text stamp and I can use my black soot distress oxide. So why did I put the lid back on? So I can use the black soot. And actually we're going to take this off the acrylic block. And just add a few little touches of the black stamping just to bring that out into the background. And whenever I use oxides, I always give my stamp a little bit of a clean, mainly because if I go into that stamp then with the VersaFine Clair, you don't want the oxides to react with the VersaFine Clair. Because I've used the distress oxide, I can now spritz that with a little bit of water. Can you see how far up I'm holding that water? So I'm just holding that up quite far away. But this time, previously I said to you that I didn't want to blot out the ink, but on this occasion, I want to blot out that ink. So I am blotting that ink on this occasion because this will bleach out the colour because I'm dabbing up that colour. Let's just, and just because I'm doing something simple doesn't mean that I still don't want a professional feel. So again, we'll use the garden text. And this is moist now because I've spritzed with water. So I do find that I tend to get it everywhere. That's me all over. So then I'm going to take the garden text again. Then I'm just going to add that garden wording just here. That's it. And then I can just take the grey ink tints pencil. Now don't forget, I'm doing this off the top of my head and just going for it, answering a question that Deb asked me and just trying to respond to that and give some ideas with no prep or no planning, just to prove how simple things can be. So then I'm going to take my little bird from TE44. Now I need the other bird because I like them to be sort of looking at the floral. So let's pull this out. Just put that back in my wallet because then nothing gets lost. And then I'm going to grab the other little bird. And obviously, if you wanted to, Deb, you could quite easily add to these and make them a little bit more layered if you wish. You obviously don't get this with the mini ink pads. But you could obviously make it as more, as more detailed or as more layered as you wish. So I'm just going to add that to the G. So I'm adding a little bird here. Like so. So I've got my little bird on the G, just so that you can see that. And then I'm going to add some splatters of white. I don't want that black touch there, so let's put a blob of white on there. So if you've got a mark on the card that you don't want, because you might be using sample pieces like me, I'm just going to make out it's a splatter. Just so that you can see, just remember simple ideas. So again, you would place this onto your black mat and you would then add that to a 5x7 card. And the minute it's matted and layered, it looks so much better. And maybe think about, have we got a scrap of black card? Let me see if I've got a scrap of black card for you. I must have a scrap somewhere. A scrap of something anyway. But what you can do, Deb, is if you wanted to make your own little embellishments, you can take a piece of the black card and you can do things like this. So imagine that's matte and layered onto here. Let's just matte and layer that one just because it's a bit curly and it's just going to irritate me because it wants to do completely the opposite to what I want it to do, which it's bound to. It's been soaking wet. So I just add a little bit more adhesive than I would normally. Let's just place that. I sort of try to get it in place. And I think, go easy on yourself and don't, when you're first starting out, don't make things too complicated. Enjoy the process. Enjoy experimenting, because when you experiment and embrace those mistakes, because from those mistakes, we learn so much. Trust me, I've made that many mistakes, but it's great because I've learned so much. And I'm still learning, but it's wonderful because I make a mistake and then I think, that's a good idea. Yes, it's worth making a mistake. And I'll tell, which one was it I was doing? I'll have to try and show you the mistake I made the other day and how I came up with another idea. So you can then, what you can do, Deb, is if you wanted a little embellishment, you can also sort of just add in a little bit of black card there, just to bring in the black. Or, and this is why I always play, you can cut it in half and you can bring a little bit of the black here. Sort of make your own little design elements, your own little design touches. Makes your design more unique. So then I can add these to here. Obviously, if you grab some tweezers and you don't try to do it like I do with long nails, because it drives you mad, because my daft long nails get in the way. So let's take this. So if you make a mistake, don't worry about it. Just think, what have you gained from that mistake? You know, you've learned something in the process, maybe not what to do next time or what to do next time. So I've got these 2 black pieces on there. And obviously, because I've added those as an afterthought, just add a few little Posca pieces. Let's add some to the black card as well, just so that you've got those. The reason I've added that Posca is so that these don't look like they're an afterthought. They look like they're part of the design. Now, normally you see me add shading with my Inktense pencil. Well, we've got this black soot on here. So now I can just, maybe should have done this before I added the Posca, but because it's black, I can now blend out some of that edge so that it's got a little bit of shading, because it's black soot, which means that it moves with water. So you can blend a little bit of that out for shading. And then if you add this to your card blank, it then looks beautifully finished. So you've got that one, or we won't add them all now because I can keep these. You've then got that nice simple one, Deb, really simple, that you can just add to a white mat. Let's come in again and let's just do one more. So another idea. So you don't have to have the minis. You can just apply the colour in a squarish shape by taking the colour onto a brush and adding it, whichever you prefer. So I've got the, where are you now? So I have, in my second set, these are the colours I have. So we have Antique Linen, Walnut Stain, Black Soot and Vintage Photo. So what I can do is I can take the Antique Linen, let's open all the lids first. Antique Linen, that one. Do I want Black Soot maybe? Okay, so I've got my colours on there, but what I can do is I can take the Antique Linen, which you can see the colour at the back. So I'll take the Antique Linen, and then I'm going to take, this must be Vintage Photo, and I'm just going to add Vintage Photo, I'm going to take the antique linen again. And I'll take a little bit of, was it walnut stain? Walnut stain. And just add a little bit of the walnut stain. And I'm not, you know, every one doesn't have to be exactly the same. So I'm going to take the antique linen. I'm going to add the antique linen. I want to add a little bit of black soot. Got the black soot. Thought I hadn't shut it then. Let's just clean that up. Then I'm going to take, so the walnut stain. So let's take a little bit of the walnut stain and add that up here. Like so. Now before you spritz, you can decide whether you want it this way or that way. We can also spritz with water now. And you can see I've spritzed that quite a lot so that everything moves. So want that, I mean, that's just like spidery web, isn't it? It's just lovely. So that just looks like a spidery web. So let's just clear this down. Of course, honestly, when I spritz with water, it goes absolutely everywhere. That's gone really like a spidery web. Could imagine that at Halloween, it'd work really nicely. So let's just take this back. Let's put that back. Let's just give that a couple of seconds just to do what it loves doing and spreading and reacting with the water. Let it do its thing. I think I'm going to use, rather than get loads of stamps out, let's just use this one again. So we'll use this. Now obviously you might have different colours of Distress Oxide minis or your big Distress Oxides. You can use them and do it. This is just ideas, so you can use it, do it in lots of multicolours, colours of the rainbow, whatever you wish. Now, if you let this dry naturally, the good thing is it will just flatten out eventually. As it starts to dry out, it'll just dry nice and flat. The problem comes when you dry it with your heat tool, it starts to curl more. But if you left it to dry naturally, it just starts to dry flat and it works really well. I haven't got the time or the patience, so let's just dry that. And it's very wet, very wet. But I have to say, I love the way it looks with the squares in there as well. You could even use the square, the little square from TE32 and develop that style with TE32. I'll show you, I've got a little bit of ink at the bottom there. But with Alpha Florals, you've got this little square here. And you could sort of develop that square idea. I'll clean the non-stick craft sheet when I've finished. But all that I'm doing in this video is answering a question that I've been asked, and hopefully at the same time it will be helpful to others. So I've got now what I can do is I can take my acetate and I can just take a look at what this will look like stamped on here. And I'm going to stamp this in black. Now don't forget, these are just playing around pieces. It doesn't matter if I make a mistake. It really doesn't matter. I'm playing. I'm answering a question, and while I'm answering a question, I'm playing with ideas. So we'll take the stamp from TE45, and we're just going to see what it looks like over there. I don't know what it's going to look like. I've looked at with my acetate and it doesn't really matter. I'm trying to give simple, basic ideas for Deb or Deborah. I should be mindful of whether people like to be called Deborah or Deb. Right, so then I can stamp this now wherever I want onto the surface of my card. Now I'm stamping this and I'm using it as a background because I can highlight one of those areas if I wish. Now you don't need to stamp, you don't need to press your hands too hard, but what I am doing is I've got lots of oxide layers on there which probably could have been dried a little bit longer. But you need to keep, I just need to make sure I didn't rock that then because I'm too busy talking. You need to be mindful that you don't talk too much like I do. Don't remove your hands from that acrylic block. But what you do need to do is when you've got a stamp this size and you've added the oxide inks below, you need to be mindful that you just give that a bit of time. Don't sort of plonk it down and think, oh, I'll lift it straight up, then it'll make an impression. No, it needs some time for that ink just to absorb onto the surface of that card. Now, I'm looking at this to be a background element. So let's just look at this to be a background element, but it's a background element. But look how mindful I'm being about giving it time. And I need to give it time because it's got that oxide ink on there. It's a little bit wet. Look at that. I just think that is gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. And what we can do, just a lovely simple idea, I can then take my antique linen and I can just drag that down the card so that it gives some colour. There's another background for you because you could just do that and then spritz it with water, add a couple of colours and you've got another background. But what I'm going to do is then stamp the butterfly on there. So let's stamp the butterfly on there. So it's got a little touch of that antique linen on there. So let's take this. And what I would suggest is, you know, I'm a great advocate that it's important you use what you spend your pennies on. I think it is. If you're spending your hard-earned pennies, you need to love the product and you need to be using them. And that's why I do so many videos, and that's why the design team like to help and do videos, because I like to see the products that I recommend or the products that I design. I love to see them used. I don't want them lying, doing nothing. So let's give that a dry. And I'm giving that a dry because we've got that oily ink and it's going on top of that pigment dye fusion. The pigment dye fusion stays wetter a bit longer because it's got that pigment element, that opaque element. And therefore, because the VersaFine Clair is going onto a surface that is no longer porous, that also stays wetter even longer than it normally does. So I'm giving that a little bit of a dry. Main reason being is I'm now going to come in and cut this out. If you don't want to cut it out, why not tear around it and just give it a little bit of a torn element. Now, I don't have to cut out the antennae on this occasion because we've got that on our first stamping, so I don't need to worry about that. So let's come in. So this is like my little question time with Tracy. So I can just bend this, and then what I can do is just add. Now, if I just add a little bit of adhesive just in the middle there, I'm automatically going to get some dimension. And you can add a little bit of, let me try and do this with one hand now. You can add a little bit of colour to the wings at the back so that when those wings are lifted slightly, you've got that colour in the background as well. So it just looks more finished off. And with it just being adhered in the middle, it automatically gives me some dimension. Let's just lift that up. Okay. You just have to wait a few moments for that to catch. But that antique linen instantly lifts that design. And then what you could do is, oh, can I get to them? I've got that many ink pads around here. Bear with me. I've got mini ink pads everywhere. Oh. Let's put these on another cupboard. Right. And then I've got some vintage pen nibs. I actually sell them. I'll have to check if I've still got some on the website. But you could instantly add a vintage pen nib to your butterfly, just so that it looks a little bit different. If you don't want the pen nibs, you don't have to worry, because in TE45 you've got the pen nibs that you can stamp and cut out and add that to here. So if we take the smallest of the pen nibs, just take this, we'll stamp that in black, like so. Stamp that in our black ink, just over the antique linen, because we've got that antique linen on there, so why not use that? Again, you need to give that a dry, because you've got those layers on there that are wet, and that permanent ink really does need drying, particularly if you are going to cut out. So let's just... Now, obviously, I can't answer every question because I'm not an expert in, well, I'm not an expert in anything, but I don't know everything. But when I can answer a question or I can help, then I will absolutely do it. So you could add your pen nib, which fits perfectly onto your butterfly. In fact, I love that. So let's add that to our butterfly. Just use my scissors just to put that in the right place. So we'll just add that, just to give that a background. Then we'll add some splatters. Now, you need to be mindful, you've got that oxide ink on there, so if you're going to use the Posca pen, because it's wet, it's going to pick up the colour from the Distress Oxide. You can use your bleed proof paint that I've shown you many times, that stays white because it's bleed proof, or you can just dry like I'm doing, just to dry the Posca pen before that moisture takes on the colour of the Posca pen. Now, if you add this to your black mat, again, it's very curled because I've added that heat. Now, if you don't add that heat and you let it dry naturally, then it does actually come back out completely flat. But if you're like me and you're demoing, obviously it just takes a little bit more patience. You can't lose your patience with it. If you're using double-sided tape, well, you haven't got the same issue, because the double-sided tape, it just grabs hold quickly and you can't move anything. It grabs hold quickly. I know some of you just pull half of it down and then rip the rest of it off. I prefer to use a wet ink. We all have different preferences, don't we? There we go. And then what you can do is just stamp the word butterfly again have we got a little bit of card on here. Make sure you press it in the middle as well, just so that it all sticks down. So we've got that little word butterfly on there. Let me just see if I can pick that up and aim it just onto the card, just right. So I've got that little word. I don't know whether I've got, oh, I have got that, look. So let me just, excuse me reaching over again. So I can use that word butterfly, just cut that out. Not exactly straight. There we go. Let's make a little bit of a better job, you know. Let's try and make it so it looks half decent. And if for instance, like I've got there, it's not the best straight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to disguise that, and I'm going to distress the edges. Distress the edges that are reasonably straight, I'll distress them less. And the little bit where it's a bit too, you know, organic, I'll distress it a little bit more. Nobody will ever know apart from me and you. So don't tell anybody, and nobody will know. Right, so then let's just take a little bit of adhesive. I can just add butterfly again here and echo that word. But even when you're doing something simple, nothing complicated, think about those nice finishing touches. I can then add my little bird, like so. And I can stamp my little bird, and I can add him to the collage. So I can stamp one little bird here. Now I'm creating my own collage. You know, and it sounds a big word, and it's very simple. It's another layer, it's collaged, it's easy. So then I can take my other little bird from TE44 facing the other way, and I can add that as if he is standing on my little wording. There we go. And there you go, Deb. You've got some simple ideas. Let's just get rid of that adhesive and place this back. Simple ideas, but then again, if you add this to a white card blank, it always looks more professional. It really does look more professional. And guess what? It's called mixed media, because I've used a whole range of different things. So that's mixed media as far as I'm concerned. No posh word, it's mixed media. And then I'm going to add a few splatters just on that corner there. Look, I'm working too hard with that Posca pen. Press it once and then it should be easier, which it is. But you don't need to be fighting with your Posca pens. So what I'm trying to do is bring in a little bit of the black card. Right, so let's wipe this up. And I'm hoping, Deb, that just gives you a few ideas, simple, basic ideas that you can add to quite easily with lots of other embellishments or some of your Deborah touches. Look at this. See this? It's a little bit I've just cut off from when I cut the butterfly word, but you could quite easily use that in your collage. You could have it here, balancing that butterfly there. So there's lots of ways you can make that card or journal page your own. So I hope you enjoyed that little question time with Tracy, and I hope you'll give those a go. Love to all, and I'll see you all soon. Bye for now.